this is great because the folks will need some time to set up the microphones, which gives me more stage time, and I'm not complaining. But anyway, that was a really, really fun discussion, and sorry about introducing Jonathan as being with another company. He's actually with Facebook. I was so busy doing my Facebook update, I did not realize he was with Facebook. Now I have to be careful because he's probably tracking everything I say. Yeah. And he can also probably tell people when I send the same message of "you look great" to 10 different people. Anyway, so going from shopping, etc., to ethnography. So that's the topic that we have coming up, the case for mobile ethnography. And to talk on that exciting subject, we have three really great people here. Nancy Luna from Kraft Foods, Claudia del Lucchese from Mondelez International, and Alex Hunt, who is EVP of Brainjuicer. So I will welcome this great team up here.
Hi, I'm going to get us started. Can you hear me okay? I have kind of like old smoker's voice today. I've been losing my voice, so sorry, I don't normally sound like this. Although Claudia, who's presenting, was trying to tell me I had sexy voice. That's a good friend, right? Anyway, we're going to talk to you today about a project that we did at Kraft, and when Claudia and I, before the company split, worked together on. And I work in the front end of innovation and trends at Kraft, and we had a team that was interested in learning more about entertaining and how could we get and develop new products that consumers would use when they were having parties and entertaining. As a cheese company, and at the time we had crackers, obviously we were hoping a lot of people were using things that, our products at parties. Velveeta, if you're familiar with it, is used mainly during Super Bowl time and things like that. How can we capitalize more on this? But surprisingly, we didn't have tons of in-depth empathy work that had been done, and we were trying to figure out how to build platforms for the company. And at the time, we also had a great partnership with Brainjuicer, and we were trying to figure out how could we follow people through their whole party journey. If you're going and doing ethnographies normally, you would just go to their house, watch, see the party. Of course, it's going to look like Martha Stewart, right, is there, having this beautiful party with everything set up in the background. Excuse me. And, we'd go and watch these parties, but we started to realize that really the event wasn't really where we needed to be. We needed to be through the journey with them. And that's when mobile became a real option for us of thinking about how could we follow along from planning all the way to post-party. And so this is a video, and it'll show you a little bit of a feeling of how it's different from what you might imagine and what it's really like, and a little essence of how we could capture using some video from the consumer themselves about how it's a little bit different, and how we can kind of understand that journey. So I'll let Michelle, who's the person who had the thing, explain a little bit to you. Well,
this is what people experience when they walk in our door.
Party!
What they experience is a little bit of chaos. And we're okay with that. Here's the bread. And we're about to start the salad. The other door they can go in is the front door, which this room was all clean half an hour ago, but so this door is open. When they come in, they will be welcomed by. But you know what? A 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, that's what happens. But you know what? There's pretty music playing. It smells delicious in here. Say hi.
Hi, penguin.
And these are all our close friends, so it's family and everybody's comfortable.
Is that some other people coming?
Should I put the bacon bits and the cheese in the containers?
Sure. Oh yeah, sure. So we're still kind of setting up, and a few more people will be coming, and then we'll all sit down and eat together.
While it was probably a little hard to hear in the video and things, that was her greeting her guests to come. Things weren't, quite the Martha Stewart-esque picture and vision of things. But we learned a lot from the different activities we had them do. This is just one example of when we had them, what is it like when your guests come, that kind of stuff, photos and things. And I'm going to have Alex talk a little bit about the method, and they were experimenting at the time early on. We actually did this study in 2011. So it's been a few years. It was one of our first dips in the water, so to say, of exploring how to use mobile from an ethnographic standpoint and innovation. And then at the end, I'll come back and talk a little bit about how we applied what we learned from the standpoint. So do you have a...
I do. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. So yeah, I'm Alex from Brainjuicer, and when Claudia and Nancy called us and said they wanted to understand the entertaining event because based on their own personal experience, they didn't feel that various events were Martha Stewart-esque. I just flatly said, I don't believe you guys. Your parties must be absolutely spectacular, well organized, managed, fantastic events, but they were just insistent that, their house was a mess and, the party sort of took a life of its own. And knowing Nancy, actually, I started to believe her after a while. So we were obviously very happy to help. I think that the first key point, though, to bring up is that the answer that we gave in terms of how do we address the client's objectives wasn't immediately, well, mobile is the way to go. At Brainjuicer, our start place to answer any client objective is to really think about, well, what do we know about human behavior? And how can we design a research approach that actually complements that understanding of human behavior? It just so happened that in terms of understanding a party, an in-home entertaining event, but mobile was an absolutely perfect fit for that objective. But that doesn't mean that it's a perfect fit or the start place, the default start place for all work, and frankly, and maybe I shouldn't say this at a mobile conference, nor should it be. So what do we know about consumer behavior? Most of you should have heard of Daniel Kahneman. If you haven't, I implore you, please, please, please read his book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It is a text that will change the way you think about consumers, and I think challenges many of the fundamentals of existing traditional market research. In the book, Kahneman outlines that we have our system 1 brain, fast, instinctive, emotional, and our system 2 brain, rational, slow, cognitive. Now the rub is that system 1 dictates more than 95% of our decisions, all right? We are really people walking through life on autopilot. We think a lot less than we like to think we think. We don't use our system 2 at all. Now, the problem with that, for existing market research, is that it's built on a system 2 model. And if you move to the next slide, the more we question, and that's what market research does, the less reliable the consumer becomes. Great example would be asking me now, 9:30, what are you going to have for lunch, Alex? Right? Now, I might stand up here and tell you, you know what, guys, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to have a burger and fries, as much as I would sort of want to tell you that I'm going to have a salad or something a little bit lighter. All right? Would be being extremely honest, but let's just suppose that I am that honest. As you question me further on my logic, my choice, well, why are you having a burger and fries, Alex? The more you question, the less honest I'm going to become, and I'm going to post-rationalize back and try to present to you, well, maybe I'll just have the burger with a salad, or maybe I'll take the cheese off the burger, because I think it's the answer that you want to hear, right? So the more we question consumers, the more you're going to get a completely unreliable answer. And that's really the intersection of mobile with this piece of research. Observational, don't leave a mark in the way that a traditional ethnographer might do. Now, if you move to one of the examples of this was Dan. So he was one of our 28 participants in the mobile ethnography. He planned a big party. I think he invited about 10 people. Actually, only one of them showed up. Rather disappointing. And you can actually see Dan up on the screen. doesn't look particularly glamorous, does it, with the food that he's eating? You know, this is the reality of his party. You know, we can only sort of imagine what we might have seen had an ethnographer been there. I'm sure Dan would have been down at CVS recruiting, you know, random people to come in to make himself at least look popular to the ethnographer. So, you know, that's part of the beauty of mobile in this context, right? We're getting the raw reality. As much as Claudia and Nancy might not like to believe that Dan is your core Velveeta consumer at his party for two, you know, rather sadly at home on a Friday or Saturday evening. So, if you move to the next slide, you know, it's also not just enough that we're using mobile in a way that complements the rather misleading way that, you know, people give answers in traditional research. There's a lot of discussion yesterday around the need also for frameworks to complement the technology. And again, at Brainjuicer, that's an integral way of the way that we work with clients. We have a behavioral model. It dictates that environmental factors, so essentially the context, you know, is very influential on the way we make decisions. But social, and in the entertaining space, you know, the idea of all the different social influences impacting on me also dictate the way that I behave, and personal factors, the way that I feel about particular things, the way that they leave me feeling. You know, they're all the key pillars that are driving my behavior. None of them rational, all of them quite irrational in many respects. And that's our System 1 framework for consumer behavior. And that's what we organized all of our tasks, all of our probing around to understand. So in the environmental context, you know, we used mobile to understand, well, where are they shopping? What's the gap between what they say they're going to do and then what happens in store? Because certain products aren't easy to find, or, you know, their packaging is overly complex. Social factors, massive in the entertaining space. You know, if you're entertaining other people, by default, you're doing it to leave an impression, to affect other people. So we want to understand, you know, who are they inviting? What sort of experience are they trying to project? What's the gap between the projection and the reality? Personal factors, you know, how does it leave you feeling? You know, how did they feel at the beginning? Were they hopeful? Were they scared? How did they feel at the end? Exhausted? What was the emotional outcome from the entertaining event? The way that they feel is probably going to be most predictive of how they behave in the future. So that's what we're trying to understand, and that's our System 1 framework, essentially, for analyzing the mobile ethnography data. So I'm going to turn it over to Claudia to talk about some of the pros and cons that we learnt on the journey as it relates to mobile ethnography.
Hi, and I'm Claudia. So I'm with Mondelez International now, but at the time I was with Kraft Food. So when our parents got divorced, I stayed with the other parent. At the time, my role was bringing new methodologies into the company. So it makes sense that I would be the one discussing the methodology itself. When we were doing this research, the main objective, of course, was the business objective of learning more about how our consumers entertain in their home. But there was also another component of this, which was trying to experiment with a new methodology, something that we had never brought into the company before. In 2011, this was really breakthrough, at least for us. And so we were also trying to evaluate the methodology itself. Well, as with everything, there's pros and cons, right? And I'm sure that you guys can come up with a ton other pros and cons than the ones that I have here. But just to list a few, so everything in the mobile ethnography is in the moment. So it's real time. Whenever people are planning something, whenever people are shopping, whatever it is that they're doing, you're right there with them because they are taking you with them in that journey. So that's one big advantage. The other one is that the timelines are shorter, but the observation periods are longer. As I was saying, with this project, they were planning, inviting folks, deciding everything that they were going to serve, then having the actual event, the day of the event, organizing everything. So it was a very long period, and we were with them through the entire thing. It allows us to do a wider geography. We were covering the entire United States. We were interested in finding out if there were differences between urban and suburban areas, if there were differences between south and north, and differences between the coasts. So this was a way, a more faster and more cost-effective way of us being able to cover such a wide geography. and also the candor and honesty of our participants. And I'm not going to say anything about that, and you'll see some examples of the type of stuff that we got. So here's some pictures of what I was talking about when I said that it's really in the moment. So from the pictures you can see a person who was really planning ahead for this event, and they were printing recipes, they were really deciding everything they were going to do, like very, very organized, very, very planned. On the second picture, you see a block of cheese. So this is actually on the day of the event. Another participant, this was their solution for entertaining, was just grabbing a block of cheese and slapping on the table, and that was it. So you see the second one. And the third one is the cleanup. So you can see the entire process of the research. Longer and dynamic observation. This was really interesting. We did the entire research over a period of two weeks. We tried to get Halloween as well as some other just parties, like 3-year-old parties or whatever other party people were planning. But then it happened that one of the participants that we had in our study, their main guest of honor had canceled on her last minute. So she came to us and asked, oh my God, do I have to drop out the study now because, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this, this party within the time period that it was allocated. And for us, it was a really great thing because it would postpone it into Thanksgiving. And we hadn't even thought of Thanksgiving at the time as another event that would be really interesting for us to capture as possibly different from just a private party. So we told her, no, it's fine, just postpone your party and we'll roll you in afterwards. So that was something that we could do because it was a mobile ethnography. If we had an ethnographer on the field with this person, probably we would have to drop this participant. So we had a wider coverage, as I was saying before, and Alex already talked about that a little bit. So we had 28 participants in 13 states serving 28 different meal types, and that was quite interesting. And then we had real candid participants. And this is a picture of a lady who she was doing a Halloween party, and she wanted to do very weird foods for her Halloween party. And she wanted to serve kitty litter brownies. And her mother-in-law thought that it was too gross, and that was the reason why she didn't really serve it. So we had this type of input into it. So as with every research, there's also cons, right? It's not only pros. And with mobile ethnography, as with everything else, there's lots of cons as well. So all the information is filtered by the participant. There is no control over data quality. And what I mean data quality is really the data quality of what the consumer is feeding you, because there's no one else there to observe. It's all filtered by them. And also the data quality of the video, for example, or what are the shots that they're giving you, or what are the pictures that they're giving you. And you saw from the video that we played earlier, and okay, this is from a mobile from 2011, it's not the best quality video, right? As I said, the ethnographer is not present to make the own observations in the context. So we have to anticipate before we go into any type of research, what are all the tasks that we're going to give them, already thinking of the data collection points, right? So this is very hard to do when you don't know what you don't know. When you have a good idea, that's great, but if you don't know what you don't know, you might miss something really important. Additional probing happens, but it happens after the fact. So it's all based on recall. And as we saw a really great presentation yesterday on video as well, the difference between people talking on real time versus remembering what happened afterwards is quite different, right? So the probing happens after the fact. The project team is distant. So when you do ethnography, you can invite your project team to come with you and tag along. But here, they are allowed to see all the videos and everything online, but that usually doesn't happen because they don't block time on their calendars to do it. So there is a distance between that. And the technology can get in the way. And what I mean by that is not so much as people don't know how to operate their phones, but more like if you're cooking and you're trying to record at the same time that you're cooking, you're trying to cook with one hand while you're filming with another. So there's ways around that, of course. You can ask someone else to film it for you, or you can put it on a pedestal or something like that, but the technology can really get on the way. So you tend to, at the end, particularly with food, get the before and the after, and not really the during. And perhaps the during would be the most interesting bit. So those are just a few, and I'm sure you can come up with a whole bunch more.
So, is my, yeah. Sorry, I thought you couldn't hear me. So after we went through this, and I have to, the one thing I should openly admit is I was actually pretty skeptical as a trained ethnographer who loves going in people's homes and discovering things and seeing the weird things that they do, and them denying that, saying that they'll never, oh, I never fry any food, and then you go in their kitchen and there's a big frying pan with an inch of grease in it. It's like, oh, my mother-in-law did that yesterday. It's usually the mother-in-law they blame. But things like that, or seeing the little workarounds that they do, I was concerned we might miss a few pieces of that. But in this case, being able to follow them more through the journey and being able to get very quickly and get through this study across the U.S. quickly so we could build those regional differences was important to us, as well as being able to, and it wasn't just one person actually that we talked to about Thanksgiving. We followed a number of people. So we were able to see more formal and more casual, kitty litter occasions. Ones that were going to be a little more like a Norman Rockwell, turkey dinner. So the way we applied this and pulled this together was to come up and look at, and Brainjuicer had some great, part of an ethnography is really having a good team of people to take all that data and analyze it and understand the cultural context, finding tension points. What are those tension points for the consumer? The problems, what do they hate about entertaining, those kinds of things. So really finding and making sure you're setting up those exercises to get a little bit past just the rational piece, but to the emotional part of how it feels to be entertaining, how it feels to be sitting at the table by yourself, and those kinds of things. So what we did is we built, and we had, you can see there was the less emotional, more emotional kind of range of areas that we did. I can't show you all the detail behind this, but we basically were able to come up with about 16 areas that we thought were right platforms that we could ideate against to come up with ideas. And the cool thing about how we did this is we did it broad enough. So it wasn't just, a lot of times I think when you work in the industry, it's like, I'm gonna just do this on Cracker Barrel. That's our entertaining cheese. I'm gonna just do it on Velveeta and learn about Velveeta and how people interact with Velveeta. We made this broad enough so that anybody in our company who's doing a project, whether it's a marketing or a new product effort, can use this to understand some of those insights behind what is it like to host a party. And what are the kind of areas that they would look at? Is it the theme? What are the things that they're using to solve those problems now, and where can we go? One of the areas that we found was people are always looking for a crowd pleaser. You gotta have something that everybody's gonna eat. And that's probably not a big aha to you, but the thing that was important to us is understanding what are the attributes and the insights around the product. What does that product have to be able to do? Does it have to be, easily, like I just set it out? A lot of times this is the vegetable platter. Everybody will eat it. Don't have to worry about gluten. Don't have to worry about all those things, or dairy allergies, whatever, and I'll put that out. Sadly for us, cheese falls a little bit on the crowd pleaser if you just have a cheese block. Everybody puts out usually a cheese block. Everybody likes it, and there's some cheeses that are kind of standbys, and Cracker Barrel is a great one. Velveeta cheese dip that you mix with Rotel. Most people love it if they like spicy stuff. Easy thing to make. And so those are the kind of standby things that people are really looking for. So then they can experiment around that. But really understanding what it is to develop underneath that. And by looking at all of the different things that people kind of ended up identifying, and they didn't call them always crowd pleasers, they may have, but those things that they were serving, it seemed like every single party, there was something that fit in this category. And so we knew that was an area where we could design around and ideate against, as well as a number of other ones. Mobile mingle bites, things that allow you to move around, depending on the type of party you were throwing. So we used that, and then we were able to ideate against it. The cool thing was, a year ago, somebody came to me and said, thinking about doing something about entertaining. I'm like, oh, and then we were able to pull all this stuff out, pull these briefs that we wrote around the areas, pull the video, show that, and bring it to life for them without them having to do a whole nother ethnographic event. That's true whether it would have been done mobile or not. But in this case, the mobile being able to have us quickly and inexpensively do a study like this was what we needed at the time. Any questions about the study?
I have some.
Oh, yeah.
To get started, basically. One was, what a great session and what a great discussion. One is where do I email or send a tweet to get free cheese to get on that program?
Free cheese.
But two things I found very interesting. One was how I made a comment earlier about engineering and technology and everything tying into today's marketing and social world. And one of the things I was reminded of was something engineers or people who studied physics know about, the uncertainty principle, that the more you try to measure something accurately, the more likely you are to impact the outcome of the results. So it's interesting to see how physics and science are sort of coming into play right here. And two was the interesting reminder about Donald Rumsfeld, we don't know what we don't know, et cetera, et cetera. But seriously, the question I would ask is, when people do know that they're being recorded, et cetera, do you think the results or whatever they're putting out there is going to be as real?
I would say not always. And I've experienced that. That's one of the things that sometimes I hesitate about this, because a lot of times what I found with doing mobile stuff, whether it's a diary before you do a real ethnography or not, is that people a lot of times, because they can't cook while they're doing this, and Claudia mentioned it, a lot of times what we'll see is like, oh, here's the stuff I'm gonna make it with, and here's the things I'm gonna do it. And a lot of times the insights for us are, what are those shortcuts or things that they do in that middle piece? And so if this would have been more about cooking, I would have been less hesitant. I may have done more of a mobile visit combination, so where maybe we could get the breath by using mobile in conjunction with it. But that was one of my worries. In this case, I think we felt a little more comfortable because it was less about the prepping and the kinds of things that they needed to do in the overall party piece. I think we didn't feel like the solution was going to be in the actual prep piece. But Alex,
No, I mean, I was going to add, I mean, I think from a, prepping standpoint, I think absolutely. I think from a social environment standpoint, I think the mobile approach was better than traditional ethnography. I mean, when you see the content, you can see that it's quite raw, and the impact on behavior. Evaluate for yourselves the difference that a stranger introduced as a market researcher sat in the corner of the room would make versus mom or dad fiddling with their cell phone taking a video. Either one could impact behavior, but I think in this particular case, given a lot of the observation was not so much prep, but just the event itself, mom or dad just fiddling with their phone had much less of an impact than a complete stranger sat in the corner. That was kind of my gut with this one. But.
And in this case, since planning was such an important part of this, and the planning happens they could record whenever they planned for a little bit. So some of them would, I'm going to download recipes. They'd do a little bit of that, record some stuff. They'd take, stuff. We could have never been with them when they were doing that. So that's a piece that we couldn't have done a more traditional way.
Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi. So when you approach these participants, do you tell them that Kraft is doing this study, or is it a third party doing the study? My main concern is, if you say Kraft is doing the study, maybe they're more likely to buy Kraft products during these studies.
So what we did with this case, we wouldn't tell them that it was Kraft, so they didn't know anything about that. And the way that we recruited at that time was actually quite different and interesting, I think. We recruited through Craigslist. So we basically put an ad on Craigslist, or not we, Brainjuicer did.
Brainjuicer, yeah.
Put an ad on Craigslist and said, if you're planning a party within the next month or so, contact us and we might be able to include you in a study. So at the time, this was quite different, and we got a really interesting breadth of participants that way. But no, they had no idea who the client was. All their interactions were always through Brainjuicer, and Nancy and I were always in the background, seeing the videos, talking to them, and we were following the research as it was happening, but we never had any interaction with the consumers ourselves.
And they knew to some extent it was about food, but we didn't really, you know, say, I mean, it could have been about paper plates for all they knew. And things, so I think
Yeah, because we told them that we wanted to know about the planning, the actual event, the inviting folks, so they had no idea what the focus was, but party has food, right? So.
And we were actually pleasantly surprised with the quality of the respondents and the fact that we got some people that I think we wouldn't have gotten from a normal panel, from, you know, a focus group facility recruiting people, because we got some pretty interesting guys and things that I don't think would have signed up for a panel normally.
Yeah, I mean, we were.
I could be wrong. But
I mean, we were overwhelmed by the response within, I think, 24 hours of having the ad up on Craigslist. You know, we had 149 people apply to join our study. The ad on Craigslist actually linked them to a very short screening survey where we could profile them in terms of demos, type of event, type of food, who they were going to be inviting. And we could then cherry pick the roughly 30 people that we invited to join. You know, I wouldn't advocate Craigslist necessarily as a way to recruit for every study at all, but I do think the example makes a fantastic point, which is that for this sort of study, you got to get outside of the traditional recruiting mechanisms. When my team came to me and said, look, you know, let's do it through Craigslist, I was like, are you kidding me? We're going to get serial killers. My only experience with Craigslist was when I was living in New York many years ago, and we had an ad for a new roommate on Craigslist, and we got some interesting people coming through. But in this case, I mean, it just worked you know, incredibly well. I think we got some great real people, as unpretty as some of them might have been.
Well, and I think the advantage too is we were asking, are you already throwing a party? It wasn't, you know, if you're on a regular panel, you're going to say, you know, the game is to get picked, right? And so they probably would have said, yes, I'm going to throw a party and make something up. In this way, it was people who were already throwing an event, and we got a nice wide variety of types of events. You know, birthday parties, Halloween parties, Thanksgiving, that we may not have gotten otherwise.
So, hi, Reg Baker. One of the issues that one has with ethnography, and especially mass ethnography, is you know, you end up collecting a lot of images of people. You know, sometimes the people you recruited, you know, in this case with parties, a lot of people sort of accidentally show up. I'm curious how you handle the permissions aspect of it. In particular, you know, this poor guy who threw a party and nobody came. I mean, does he know, right, that you're going to show his picture in front of 200 people in Chicago and he's okay with that? How do you handle all of that sort of thing?
It's a good question. When the participant signs up and agrees to participate, they agree to all of our various series of privacy you know, collateral that they're signing over, all of the information, the ideas to us. In terms of how that works for a third party, I would honestly need to check with, you know, with our team how they cover that. Short answer is not sure for a, you know, third party who hasn't actively opted in.
It's no different than how we handle normal ethnographies. You know, I mean, we would never show that picture on an advertisement or something like that. We're not doing this like Walmart, who often will do ethnographic like interviews like that and then use them for, you know, clips and advertisements. That wasn't our intent in this case. But with any kind of ethnographic or qualitative work, they always have to agree that, you know, the videos and the clips, I mean, and they know. And people actually, I find, love sharing, love participating in this stuff because they feel like they're helping you build things. And you can really build, you know, when it's live, you can build a relationship with them. But I felt like we would ask them questions. Brainjuicer did a good job of, they would observe stuff and then they would follow up with questions. So making sure you could probe. And so there was a little more of a relationship there.
Actually, I know there's a whole lot of questions out there, so I request, in the interest of time, we're going to complete this session here, move on to the next one, but if you can meet up with the speakers during the lunch hour, that will be great. Otherwise, we'll be going into the next session. So a big round of applause for Nancy, Claudia, and Alex. Thank you so much.